Welcome to the Achieving the Dream webinar, Designing and Leading an Engaging Workshop. My name is Kate Doom Patel, and we have two wonderful presenters today. And before I introduce them, I want to cover a little bit about how we're going to do this webinar. We have enough attendees on the line that I can't unmute all of you, or there'd be quite a bit of background noise. We welcome your questions and your thoughts, but instead of unmuting everybody, I will ask that you send those questions and thoughts through the question box on your GoToWebinar toggle screen. There should be a little questions button and a little plus sign, and you can expand by clicking that plus sign, type in a question. It will come to me, and when we're at a good spot in the presentation, I'll address that to our presenters, and they will answer the question for the whole audience. So we do ask that you be thinking about questions. Don't wait till the last minute. We'll try to get them all covered in a timely manner. I want to introduce Luzelma Canales and Linda Villanueva. They are both Achieving the Dream data coaches, and they are going to lead our webinar today. Linda?
Good afternoon. It's so wonderful to be with you, Kate, and to be with my colleague and good friend, Dr. Luzelma Canales. Just as part of our introductions, as Kate has indicated, we both serve as data coaches for Achieving the Dream. I also serve as the Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs for Brazosport College and Achieving the Dream Leader College and a Top 10 Aspen finalist. Luzelma, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Linda. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and thanks, Kate, for organizing this for us. As Linda said, I'm Luzelma Canales, and I've actually just made a transition to work for the Communities Foundation of Texas / Educate Texas to run a large-scale collective impact initiative in the Rio Grande Valley in Deep South Texas. I worked at South Texas College and was the lead for Achieving the Dream and facilitated it to become a leader college for 15 years, and then moved on to Lone Star College System, and now I'm doing this work. Also in Achieving the Dream data coach since 2009. So welcome.
Great. So let's review some objectives. By the end of today's webinar, we'd like to be able to review the DREAM proposal requirements for active engagement of participants, to understand the key principles of active learning, to provide some tips and strategies for implementing active learning techniques in DREAM proposals, and finally, we'd like to examine a couple examples of successful descriptions of participant engagement for DREAM proposals. I think we'd also like to both acknowledge the fact that we're trying to deliver a webinar about designing and leading an engaging workshop in a format that doesn't always lend itself to being very engaging. But we'll certainly do our best to provide useful information so that you have the best tools to ensure a successful proposal and an even better DREAM conference experience.
And I think I want to add to that this is probably just nothing that is new to you. It's something that you do on a daily basis in your classrooms and in your meetings. And so this is just a refresher so that as you submit your proposals, like Linda said, we have an opportunity to help you enhance your proposal in a way that it meets the requirements of Achieving the Dream. So, you know, one of the things that we want to talk about is in many of our evaluations, Linda, if you could click forward, please. You know, many of the things that we've been receiving back is, well, you know, that when we read the proposal, the description of the session, it talked about it being engaging, and then folks were disappointed that they didn't really have an opportunity to ask questions, or that they felt that they could have contributed something in the sessions. And so part of the reason that this webinar was put together was that some folks felt like the sessions that they were participating in could have been a bit more engaging.
And because of this, Achieving the Dream, while they've always required that proposals incorporate active learning, they wanted to deliver this webinar so that we could underscore this requirement and to provide any help that we can to help improve workshops. So as outlined in the request for proposals, workshops are required to actively engage attendees, and Achieving the Dream especially encourages including experiential learning techniques. So in your proposal, you must be able to explain how participants will be engaged in their own learning during your workshop. And also keep in mind that proposals that engage and involve audience through experiential learning will have the best chance of being accepted. But first, let's address why the need for active learning to begin with. Well, besides the fact that workshops that don't incorporate active learning are not always so fun to be a part of, we're reminded by Chickering and Gamson that in order for adults to learn, we must be engaged. So just as our students have a difficult time learning from rote memorization, we know that true learning occurs when we're active participants who are asked to talk about what we're learning, write about what we're learning, relate it to past experiences, and apply it to our daily lives. In other words, we must make what we learn a part of ourselves. Lucelma.
So one of the things, for example, that Linda and I, as being faced with the challenge of trying to deliver a webinar on how to deliver an engaging session during face-to-face, one of the things that you'll hear from us later is asking questions in the middle of a presentation at the beginning, not allowing too much time just where we're speaking to participants. So one of the ways, for example, for us, if we were doing this face-to-face, would be to get a sense of what kinds of strategies you find are best engaging in participants, in face-to-face workshops. So I know this isn't new to you, but one of the things that we could do would be go around the room and ask, what strategies and why do you find them engaging, and how has that helped create new learnings for opportunity. One of the best things about Achieving the Dream and the Dream Conference is that they really is about peer learning and not just about going to a conference. Some of the big takeaways that we have heard in evaluations is that folks have an opportunity to really engage, ask questions, and even from the presenters, I know myself, as both a practitioner at the community college and as a coach, I go away with sessions really learning more than what I present. Because what you hear about what other colleges are doing is really important. And so this could be a way, this was one of the ways that we were trying to kind of, had we been delivering this face-to-face, this would be one spot where we would be using an engagement strategy to engage our participants in a dialogue. So Linda, could you, there we go. So then we also know that active learning strategies are a great way to get your audience involved and excited. The best experience as both a participant and as a workshop deliverer is, when you can't get rid of people. When you have the next group coming into your session and there's still a line of folks wanting to talk to you, or that there's still folks talking about in the hallway, oh, did you hear this? Or this is how we can use what we learned, or this is what we discussed as a group. So that's another way of being able to kind of gauge whether your audience is engaged or not. So these are just words, that it's always good to just kind of see. It really is about being collaborative. It really is about, I have a colleague who is a psychologist, and he talks always about, the best learning is developmental learning. Unfortunately for us, developmental means like remedial, but developmental really is opportunity for growth. And so, and the best way to grow, as Linda said earlier, is really by giving folks the opportunity to be fully engaged in their learning experience. And not only that, but to making connections to, this is what I'm doing at my college, if I could only tweak it this way. So being able to have an opportunity for the ATD session to be your sounding board on, this is what I have, could this happen if we shifted this is a way that it could work at our institution. And so these are just words that kind of will get you to think about, are these things happening as we're delivering our workshop? And then, we always, in my school of business, I always remember my professor saying, that it is so important that one of the reasons why we have very active classroom environments is that, if you just tell it to me, I'll forget it. If you show it to me, I may remember, but if you have me do it and be a part of it, I am certain to understand it. So we're not just seeking for folks to go away remembering what we taught, what we're sharing with them, but to really clearly understand what it is that you're sharing with them, so that potentially what's being shown and displayed at the Achieving the Dream conference, at the DREAM conference, is really things that we want to clearly understand so that we can take back and implement and or use that as a foundation for doing things at our own institutions. And so, how do we keep, people engaged? It's through asking questions and other things. If you could keep clicking, Linda, until we get to the next slide. So it really is, this is what we want to see. These are the pictures of people that are fully engaged, people that are participating, whoever is running these meetings or workshops really has their folks engaged in that. And so one of the questions that you could ask is, what is the recommended time that you should lecture before you move on into an engagement activity? I mean, we're all very high energy. I always say that in our community college environments, we have a lot of folks with ADD, because we're always jumping to the next thing because we get really excited about what we're learning and we're right away connecting it. So if you move forward to the next slide, what you'll see is, some of these are the recommended time frames for being able to capture folks' attention. And so we're going to, this is just one of them, but Linda and I will be sharing with you an outline of what we think might be a good kind of outline for how many minutes maybe and where to throw in some of the engagement activities. But very much these are kind of the learning so that you can hit every learning style. So starting with a lecture and then throwing in some discussion, then again into lecture, then discussion or activity, and so forth. So this is just one example that we wanted to share with you. And now Linda will go through some checklists with you.
So at the end of preparing for a workshop, Peter Ewell reminds us that we can check for a list of 4 different observable behaviors to ensure that our participants at DREAM have had the best chances of learning. First, they need to demonstrate participatory behavior by being active and responsive in our workshop. And of course, they can only do this when we provide them with opportunities to be active and responsive. Second, they should demonstrate creative thinking. Participants in our workshops should be encouraged to come up with their own solutions or suggestions. They should bring new insights to whatever topic we're talking about, and they should be able to apply what they learn at their own colleges. Third, they should demonstrate engaged learning. So in other words, participants should take what they learn and be able to apply it to any given learning situation that you might feel is appropriate. And finally, our participants should demonstrate their own construction of knowledge. So instead of just passively receiving information, we want to provide them with tasks that guide them to understanding and learning. And if you have ensured that you have done and provided opportunities to display every one of these 4 observable behaviors, you've provided and ensured that they have every opportunity to learn from your material. So as Lusama was saying, there are 20 different ways to involve your participants that we'd like to share with you, but for your workshops at DREAM and beyond, and we won't read every single one of them, but instead we'll point out a couple here and there. A great and simple way to involve participants is simply to ask them to introduce themselves at the beginning of your workshop, perhaps by taking a poll of their role at their colleges, whether or not they're a faculty member or an administrator, their year of participation in Achieving the Dream, maybe their role in Achieving the Dream, for example, whether or not they're in the core team or the data team. Doing this allows you to get to know your audience and may even lead you to modifying your presentation should you see that the audience is uniquely different than what you had in mind. Another good tip is to, I'm sorry?
No, Linda, I was going to add there that one of the great questions to ask at the beginning also is what they hope to learn from the session.
Absolutely.
And if you could kind of then get somebody to write those down, then you could check at the end whether you met the objectives that the folks that signed up for your workshop, did they actually meet their objective at the end.
Absolutely. In fact, that's what I was just going to say is that it's really good to ask those burning questions at the very beginning and then survey them at the end to see if they've been addressed. And if they haven't, that's a really good opportunity to, again, engage the audience and make sure that all of your objectives have been met. Thank you for mentioning that, Liselma.
So the next one, for example, could be, as Linda and I said, asking questions of the audience during the presentation. And believe it or not, the way that Linda and I have been exchanging in delivering some of this workshop is also another engagement activity. I know that some of what I'm really interested in always is how a college interacts, you know, or how the group that's presenting interacts with each other, because it tells me a lot about the culture of that institution and or the partnership that's presenting together. And so being able to also then break the monotonous of somebody talking for a straight 30 minutes and being able to, as participants, to be able to hand off to each other and to contribute is also a great way to deliver some of this. But then purposely putting in place some questions in the middle so that you're kind of reminding people that there are clearly some opportunities for them to contribute. You know, and a little bit of humor is good, but I've also been to some sessions where the humor was really not what it needed to be. And we also need to remember that in a lot of our Achieving the Dream, you know, Achieving the Dream is a large family now. And so we've got to be sensitive to, for example, we've got our traditional community colleges, but we also have very rural small colleges. So making a joke about small colleges may not be appropriate, but also now we have our Native American tribal colleges, and we've got our Hawaiian colleges, and so forth. So what might be appropriate, for example, in the Hispanic community, and in my totally 95% Hispanic college may not be appropriate for another college. And so just checking ourselves and our humor might be a good thing. But, for example, just, you know, getting folks to kind of laugh at themselves in a professional way is also a way to engage folks.
I think you and I have done a good job of that ourselves in workshops that we've done together, huh, Liselma?
I think so too. You know, and if you look at number 9, the idea of many of us cannot bring students to the DREAM conference, but I have actually sat in some really powerful presentations or sessions where a college will bring forth, you know, some interviews with students. And I think Kay McClenny and Arlene Arnsberger do a really good job of putting in between their workshop video clips of students telling their story when it's actually a really good spot. And so you may not be able to bring your students or bring your community partners, but being able to throw in a little bit of video in there can be a really good opportunity to inspire folks and to bring the student voice or the partner voice to your sessions.
Great tip. So I love to ask participants to engage in something called Think, Pair, and Share, and this is where participants are asked to individually and silently ponder a posed topic or question, and then to pair up with a neighbor, and then afterwards they're asked to share with the audience. And of course, depending upon your audience size, you may not be able to get to everyone, but this is especially useful when you're asking for participants to develop solutions that address a collective problem. I also love to set up demonstrations that require the participation of the entire audience. A good example of this is when I give presentations about student success courses, and I ask the audience to engage in an actual activity that students are asked to perform. This way they not only see things from the perspective of being a student in my classroom, but then they're provided with activities that they can actually take back home. So it's good to walk a mile in the shoes of the students, and they've seemed to have always been interested in that.
You know, in number 14, Linda, I would add that something really good to engage folks and kind of also gauge, you know, where folks are in their understanding of key information. Something really effective that we've been able to use in getting folks involved is to get them to guess what percentage of students, for example, maybe in your development are testing into developmental studies in math, in reading or writing. And then after the if it is a more mature institution, and they have outcome data that shows that their strategy worked, what would be the guess of the group of the increase in student success outcomes that they had? So there's really good ways to keep people engaged and ask them questions, or even as I've done in the past, is asked in a group, how many of you can tell us what percentage of students at your institution are? And that could get folks to think about maybe key data elements that you're collecting or that you're reporting on that other colleges that may be new to the initiative are things that they should be thinking about as they're implementing their culture of evidence, but may not be clearly already documenting. So that's another way to kind of engage folks.
I really appreciate that you had mentioned that, Lucelma, and I think that another unintended consequence of doing that by asking listeners to guess, certain facts or data, is that it also kind of builds rapport and community among your audience. And I think a good example of this is when we have new colleges that join Achieving the Dream who haven't always seen data from other colleges. And so one of the standard pieces of data that I've always shared with audiences is to ask them if they know the percentage of students who place at the very lowest level of developmental math who then actually end up finishing college algebra within 5 years. And at my own college at the time, when we first started Achieving the Dream, it was only 5%. And so it's pretty shocking to hear that 95% of students aren't going to be successful in completing college algebra and successful in completing their degree. But then they find out and share with others that I'm not alone, and we actually are very similar in unfortunately, that very sad outcome. So I'm very glad that you pointed that out.
So one of the other ways to engage folks, if we look at number 16, is test for volunteers. If you have activities, and this is one that I actually saw Linda and another one of our data coach colleagues, Dr. Rigo Rincones, put together as they're building logic models and as they were delivering their session on logic models and evaluation. When you do some group activity, is asking folks to designate a scribe or asking folks to get someone to report out. Or to just keep track of the time and then someone else, like I said, do the report out. And number 17 is really just another way of saying the same thing that we said earlier. It's not verbatim, having a test, but really it is about helping folks, kind of begin to use their mind to connect what they're learning back to their institutions. Even asking folks to, one really powerful session that I saw once, and this is totally not related to community college and student outcomes, but if you all remember, it was the movie on Freedom Riders, and when the teacher says to the students, if you've seen someone from your family, be impacted by violence or that has been murdered, step forward. Okay, now if you've had 2, if you've had 3, and it was just so powerful to tell the story, how the teacher was able to tell the story of how many students in that community were being impacted by really serious things. So there's a way to do, as Linda said, well, how many of your colleges have, 4 levels of developmental studies in each of your disciplines? What about 3 levels? What about 2 levels? What about 1 level? And those would probably be the most innovative colleges right now. And what are you doing? And then that can begin the discussion on what are folks doing to accelerate developmental studies. And so there are ways to, like Linda said, to create community and to get the colleges also to connect with each other during your workshop, so that it allows them to get to know each other in addition to getting to know you as an institution that's doing the presentation. And also this over-reliance on slides. We really don't want to get to the point to where we're reading off of slides to our audience, or too many slides, in a workshop. So being able to pace yourself so that you allow time for these engagement activities in the middle is something that we're really hoping happens in these sessions.
Good point. So at the end of our workshop today, we wanted to just provide a couple of examples of some of the workshop proposals that have been submitted, and first we'd like to start off with just an example outline of how you might be able to design your workshop. So kind of building upon everything that Lucelma and I have already talked about, it's always a good idea, if time permits, to begin by having an interactive icebreaker. At that same workshop that Dr. Rincones and I were participating in or delivering, we began by asking people to write and think about items that they would need to take to a beach. And we had them write them on little index cards. And we did a little icebreaker in conjunction with that. So people kind of felt like they were comfortable, and it was also a way of demonstrating what topic we were engaging in. But the other thing that we did is, because we both came from different institutions, we wanted to talk about our different institutions, and they were very different in the sense of size and in the sense of the types of students that we served, and geographic location. And so it was important for them to have that context. And so especially when you're presenting with others, you want to be able to give that general overview of who you are and where you're from. But again, always being able to infuse another active learning activity in that logic modeling workshop that Lucelma was just talking about. We actually have participants provided with templates of logic models and evaluation plans, and we ask them to think of an intervention at their home campus that they would like to develop one for. We provide them with the tools through a little bit of lecture and back and forth. I talk about some evidence-based strategies that support some of my own interventions, and then we let them engage in actually developing logic models and evaluation plans. But of course, we always wrap it up by allowing time for questions and reactions from the audience, and so that's very important. But as you notice by looking at this outline, there is audience participation throughout. Lucelma, is there anything that you wanted to maybe add here at all?
No, and I think that this isn't, I mean, it really isn't about the time, like 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 5 minutes here. It really is more about, this is a good just kind of outline of how you can break the monotony of just presenting. And I know for some of us, we are so proud of what we do that we want to share as much as we can with the audience. But it isn't just about telling our story. It's opportunities to learn from each other. And we can only learn from each other if we have an opportunity to be really thoughtful in the questions that we ask. Giving folks the opportunity to say, did this happen to you? What was the lesson learned from it? This is what we learned, and this is how we grew from it. So just giving folks the opportunity, and that really is the big difference between the DREAM conference and all the other conferences that I participate in. And what I find the most valuable is the opportunity to build community with our other colleagues from other Achieving the Dream schools, and always remembering that we have folks that are very mature leader college institutions that have been in Achieving the Dream since 2004, to very brand new cohorts, you know, that have been months into it, less than 6 months into it when we have the DREAM Institute. So keeping in mind that we have a varying degree, that may be another way, you know, to find out who's in your audience, is by asking, what year did you join Achieving the Dream, so that you get a sense of who's in your audience, so that you can always check your language and the assumptions that we make when we're presenting to folks.
I'd like to jump in and remind folks that we are taking their questions. If you have any questions or thoughts that you would like to share, please type them into the little question bar on your GoToWebinar toggle screen, and I will read those questions aloud to our presenters, and they will answer for the whole audience. Please don't wait till the end. We want to get as many questions in as we can, so go ahead and send them in. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Kate. Well, Lucelma, I'm reminded of how important it is that we learn from one another. That truly is the purpose of our DREAM conference. And I'm not going to read this to you, but I can tell you that I was actually reviewing the guidelines from Achieving the Dream on DREAM proposals, and I was struck by an example that they provided from, Kate, do you know who this college is, the one that you see in front of you?
You're asking me to remember a whole lot. No, I don't
Oh, no,
remember.
I'm sorry.
I will say, just for clarification, the word description up there in the title, just to clarify, in the DREAM proposal submission language, the description is actually what gets printed in the book. So this would actually be a narrative. Just so
That's
folks
right.
don't get confused down the line. The narrative is for submitters to give more explanation to the review committee about how they're going to engage the audience and other aspects.
So, but this is an example that, you know, I looked at and I thought, wow, this is really brilliant. I mean, they very clearly talk about, you know, we're going to spend 5 minutes explaining this intervention evaluation plan, and then they tell us, you know, this is going to set the stage for small group discussion. So they tell you immediately, you know, this is the active, you know, learning that's going to happen. These are the questions that we're going to ask of the audience, and then, you know, we're going to present some next steps. You know, there's struggles, but again, they're going to go back to groups to discuss how we could have handled the situation differently. And they talk about how they'll repeat this process 2 times, each cycle lasting, and they tell, you know, exactly about 20 minutes. So then they talk about how they are going to talk with participants in a large group and to share similar situations that they've experienced, their chosen course of action, and results. And what then I finally loved really about this was that they were going to leave audience members with a cumulative tip sheet that the presenters would later email to participants and to Achieving the Dream for further dissemination. So again, they're broadening the audience and the learning experience for potentially all Achieving the Dream member institutions. And so I really want to give kudos to whoever it is that put this together, because it's a great example, and one that if I were reviewing for proposals that I would say would get high marks for infusing active learning, demonstrating that they plan to. So that brings us to the end. Unless Lucelma has any other final thoughts.
No, I think that was a really good example, Linda, because I think one of the things that I always take away from the DREAM conference and when I have presented is how many people do reach out to you after the conference to get additional information on certain things. And folks will reach out to you if they can take away some real learning from it.
Kate, I think we'll turn it back over to you.
I'm a little disappointed. We only received one question. So if you have a question, please go ahead and type it in quickly. The question is how, or is this webinar being recorded, and how can we access it? Yes, it is being recorded, and by the end of the week it will be posted on the Achieving the Dream website under Dream Call for Workshop Proposals. And once it is posted, I'll actually email all attendees here, as well as we'll send out an email to the whole network, so everyone will know that this resource, this webinar, has been posted. We also did a webinar last week on how to present data and information effectively in a workshop environment. That workshop is already posted, but our blast email will contain links to these 2 recorded webinars. I think I have another question. One second. Just a little feedback. Great job presenting. I enjoyed your energy.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see. One more question. In an earlier slide, there was 15 minutes for, quote, lecture, unquote. Is 15 minutes too long?
I think it depends on the topic and kind of the activities that you have, because 15 minutes, if it's going back and forth between 2 presenters, let's say, that may not be too long. Let's say that it's 2 colleges presenting on, and I'll use your example, Linda, on the success of college success courses, but they have implemented them in very different ways. And if 2 presenters are presenting on them, and Linda may be sharing the story of her college, and I may be presenting the story of my college, with opportunities to really engage in dialogue where we're even asking each other questions, that's also a way to engage, because we are kind of having a dialogue that you may be engaging with other colleagues. And so it just depends on the topic. Now, if this is about learning theory or, things like that, it may be a bit too long to do 15 minutes. And so I think that the topic and the format that you're using, and I also really think it depends a lot on the presenter. Because if the presenter is a very engaging, high-energy person, that is infusing a little bit of humor here, that it's breaking the ice here, that may be asking a question in a show of hands, because the engaging activity doesn't have to be a whole 5 minutes. It could be something just right there, breaking it by asking folks to show their, a show of hands, or to stand, or to, like Linda said, turn to your neighbor and ask a question, whatever comes to your mind the first 30 seconds. And so I think it just depends. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think you have to look at the topic and then look at how you're delivering those 10 to 15 minutes of the topic.
It's also asked, how many people should folks expect in any session? And I can answer that. It varies widely because we have around 25 workshops running concurrently, and we don't ask folks to sign up ahead of time. So it's really, it's down to the last minute decisions, and we have no way of knowing how many folks will come to which session. So we say to plan for up to 50, but really I think the smaller workshops can be around 12. The larger workshops can be over 50. It really depends on the topic that you're presenting and how enticing your title and description are.
I think in most of the ones I've seen, Kate, it's been around 20 people, 20 to 25.
Yeah, it varies widely, but that's probably a good average. I will say that also when you're designing your workshop proposal and thinking about how much time to spend on what activities, you might also want to do a dry run or a rehearsal, because I've been to many where folks had engagement activities but they just ran out of time, and that's really a shame. So I don't have any more questions. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We will be posting the recording shortly. Thank you, Linda and Luzelma, for leading this webinar. I know it's a bit difficult to talk about how to lead an engaging workshop while you're doing it through a webinar, which does not lend itself very well to engaging the audience. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day. We look forward to reading your proposals. If you have any questions about DREAM proposals, please email me. You can email events, that's plural, at achievingthedream.org. They come to me and I'll answer them. My job with Achieving the Dream as a consultant is to improve DREAM each year, so I'm happy to help in any way I can. Thank you again and have a great day.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.